Joining us today, we have none other than the living legend, Larry Zbyszko. Larry, thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, you're welcome, guys. My pleasure. Once in a while, I step out of my normal hermit life and touch base with the public to keep what's going on in the world. So this will be fun. We'll have a fun time.
All right. Now, Larry, going back, we try to ask this to a lot of people, and we want to ask your opinion. Do you remember the first time you saw professional wrestling? Can you remember the back when you became a fan of it?
Oh yeah. That I was born in Chicago, and I must have been maybe 12 years old or so. 11, 12. My dad was transferred to Pittsburgh, so the family moved from Chicago, off to Pittsburgh. And when I got to Pittsburgh, I think in those days we moved out to where we had 7 stations. And it was the first time I saw pro wrestling. It was, the Channel 11 Saturday evening pro wrestling, studio wrestling. That's what it was, studio wrestling with Chilly Billy Cardilli. And, of course, one of the big stars there was Bruno. And that's when I became probably the biggest wrestling fan around, and Bruno became my hero.
Now, they do say it's sometimes hard to idolize somebody and then meet them, but the first time that you met Bruno, were you disappointed?
Oh, no, I freaked out. You know what? It's funny. The very first time I met him, because my parents would always drag me off to church, and I was never a big church goer, but when you're a kid, So I was probably maybe 13, 14, big Bruno fan, big wrestling fan. Mom and Dad dragged me and the brother and sister off to church one morning, and I'm sitting there in the pew, and I look down the pew. Who in the hell is sitting down the pew with his wife and little kids? It's Bruno. He's at the same church. And I freaked out. So the family gets up and goes to communion, right? But I don't go to communion because that way I can slide down the pew and sit right next to Bruno. So that's what I did. So the family thought I was going to hell, but I'm sitting next to Bruno. So then after that, I may still even have it somewhere. There's so much junk in boxes in the annex. I grabbed the church, like in a bulletin of the day or whatever, and I chased Bruno after the Mass. And I said, "Oh, Bruno, yeah, my name's Larry. I'm a big fan." And he autographed my, St. Sebastian's piece of paper thing I had. And I still have that somewhere. And it was funny. He was wrestling a guy named the Beast. Everybody's coming out of church, and there's this kid bugging Bruno. He's trying to get away, and I'm yelling, "Good luck with the Beast!" And you can see him cringe. Oh, God. He just gets the hell out of there. But that's the first time I met him. Later, a few years later, I bust into the guy's backyard, crawling through his hedges. It's ridiculous.
Larry, so if we go back in time now, before you became the new living legend, you trained under Bruno Sammartino, and you also debuted in 1973. What was it like training back then to become a pro wrestler? And could you maybe compare it to how guys are trained today? I mean, is there big differences?
Well, you know what? There's really no comparison, because back then there were no training facilities. There was no wrestling schools. They didn't want people in the business. They wanted you sitting out in a chair holding a ticket stub. And if some guys got too, pushy about it, they'd say, "Okay, here, go have a practice match with this guy, Carl Gotch. Don't worry, he's an old guy. Don't worry about him." Carl would break the guy's arm, and then he'd go to the neighbor and go, "Oh, he broke my arm, man, it's so tough they are." It was a different business. When I started working out with Bruno, we worked a lot on the weights, and he showed me basic holds and the submission holds and things you don't learn in high school that he knew. But I already had I was already getting a wrestling background with all the amateur wrestling stuff and the judo stuff I was doing because I wanted to be a pro wrestler so bad. And then just by watching TV, back then, arm drags, a hip toss, wrestling holds, we kind of knew and learned on the fly, but there really was nowhere to go and learn. There was no schools, like every city has 5 schools nowadays.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But back then, they didn't even want you in the business. It's really a torturous thing. I mean, the performance center that the WWE sets up, that these guys are training at, the new, hopefully talent, they're going through a hell of a training. I mean, these guys are in phenomenal shape. And they're very well conditioned. And we had that, later in life, gyms started popping up. But in the 70s and early 80s, when we were on the road, they didn't have gyms. There was no LA Fitness. There was no Gold's Gyms. There was nowhere to go to work out when you went to a city. Once in a blue moon, you found a YMCA that had dumbbells and a punching bag and a medicine ball. I mean, it wasn't like today. But, you had a different breed of man, too. You had a big, tough kind of man, kind of breed of men that they don't make anymore nowadays. It's a different era.
Yep.
Now,
I mean, if you could imagine, Bruno walking into the men's room changing a baby's diaper, that wouldn't happen.
Speaking of Bruno Sammartino, he was not only your mentor, but also became one of your greatest rivals. You had some pretty bad things done to you whenever Bruno's fans kind of let you have it. What was the worst thing that you had done to you?
Well, there were so many different ones. It was kind of weird because, I was kind of like, everybody loved me, young, good guy, tag team with Gurria, Bruno's protege. And then when Bruno retired, I wound up kind of lost in his shadow, where even the promoters didn't even know my name. And, they'd say, oh, Bruno's protege guy, what's his name? So I went kind of like overnight at a pretty young age from being just like a middle of the card, young up and coming guy to the most hated man alive. I mean, like overnight. And I wasn't really ready. I kind of freaked out. I really wasn't ready for the amount of hatred that came down upon me from the wrestling fans. I mean, I walked out, my cars would be smashed, lit on fire.
Oh, man.
Stab riots every night, from the balconies, chairs and whiskey bottles would come flying down. But they had scared me the most. The one time I left an arena and someone shot at me, and a couple feet above my head, the bricks, shattered.
Wow.
Yeah, after the big loud pop, I could feel, the bricks shatter and fall on me. That was probably the one that got me moving the quickest.
Now, was there any point during that time that you just said, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be the bad guy. I'm done.
You know what? At that time, I didn't think like that. At that time, I didn't expect it nor plan it to work out the way it did. But I found myself, because of what happened, the big historic feud with Bruno, it kind of nailed my legacy in the business. And because of all the publicity, every other territory that, you could make good money in, the NWA, the AWA, always wanted me. So, and they wanted me to be hated to make money, for their companies. So
sure.
I never changed, my persona, because that's what made me the money and
sure.
And all that. So, and what the promoters wanted, and the people hated me. Anyway, it took 20 years. I finally, changed it when I did the broadcasting. But,
Sure.
yeah, it was an interesting, it was an outrageous dream, my boys.
Now, Larry, your feud with Bruno culminated in a steel cage match at Shea Stadium on August 9th, 1980, in front of an audience of over 40,000 people. Can you bring us back to that day and what it was like going out to face Bruno outside in front of a crowd that large?
Oh, yeah, it was one of those moments that you never forget. I mean, when I walked out of the dugout, and it's a complete different perspective. I mean, when you're a fan and you're watching a baseball game and you're sitting up in the bleachers looking at the field, it's one thing. You walk out of the dugout and look up, and there's 40,000 people, and they're all staring at you. And they're holding up signs, "We want blood." And they mean it. Yeah, I mean, it was an awesome feeling. I mean, it was like, but because it was so big and so intense, I mean, the energy, I felt invincible. You know, like the song Bob Seger, "The Rock."
Yep.
I mean, like the strongest I felt, and the shining in the sun. I mean, me walking out of the dugout at Shea, when I hear that, kind of reminds me of that moment, because it was it's undescribable, it's
Sure.
ecstasy.
Now, you also spent some time working with David Sammartino, Bruno's son. Was it the same feeling with him, or were you just happy to still kind of get to work with the Sammartinos in one way or another?
Well, you know what? It worked out pretty good at the time, because the fans bought it, so it made it easy from my perspective, because I can cause riots every night. And David held up his end. He was good, and we had good matches, and the name value there, so the people were into it. And I remember one time in what the heck was it? The Philippines. In the Philippines, and I was wrestling David. And David almost had me beat, but the Philippines, there was a weird audience, man. There was like a lot of Arabians there, and they had knives on them, and like big guerrilla fighters were standing along the doorways with machine guns. I mean, the place was crammed. And I got kind of weirded out, so I hit David with a low blow. Down he went, and I got disqualified. And all of a sudden, a riot breaks out.
Oh, no.
All these Saudi Arabia guys with their, outfits like, Indiana Jones would come flying in the ring, and I'm, trying to fight me and stab me, and I'm running around, and chairs are flying off the balconies, trying
Wow.
to, I'm running for my life to the dressing room. And then I find out later that the funny bit was that all these Saudi Arabian guys, and back then, what was this, early 80s, I didn't even know anybody would know who the hell I was from a different country. But back then they were already selling TV shows. So,
Yeah.
You grew up in Saudi Arabia or Russia, you've been watching wrestling, for 20 years. So they all knew me in the whole saga. But what I found out earlier was these people were betting on the match, and they bet on David to win or something. And then when David was about to win and I hit him with a low blow, they lost their bets or something. Anyway, they all freaked out, and a big riot broke out over betting with these Arabian guys with these like knives and guys with machine guns, right? God, that was funny.
Well, Larry, let's fast forward a little bit to today's wrestling. You've been outspoken about writers in the business today, and you were quoted as saying, if they get rid of the writers, they get rid of the problem. Wrestling is a spectator sport. Writers are something that's killing it. It's not that kind of show. Tell us your feelings on pro wrestling is like today. I mean, compared to when you started out. Is it just too many writers, too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing?
Well, when I started out, I mean, like take the word writer. There was a zero. They didn't exist. Mm-hmm. It was talent. I mean, if they had, whether it was me or the Valiant Brothers or Captain Lou Albano or, Bruno or Chief Jay Strongbow, it was time for an interview. they grabbed the microphone and talked, and were themselves and connected with the crowd. And nowadays, it just seems like, these guys don't become themselves. They get so many writers, but unless you've been in the ring wrestling from the 70s and the 80s, it's not like you're, a dummy, but you just don't have a clue. It'd be like someone hiring me to be a chemist. You wouldn't want to do that. I'd blow the place up. I don't know what I'm doing. But when it comes to professional wrestling, it's a unique animal. It's a unique product, and that's why it's always had like a cult following. You were a wrestling fan, or you couldn't stand it. There really wasn't any middle ground. And so, too, you got, I don't know what the story is and how many, but you get a whole bunch of writers. None of them knows the psychology. What the hell are you going to do? You got 50 different ideas coming at you. None of them are right. Mm. So, and then it's, I just see the business being a lot easier if you let the cream rise to the top. If a guy's going to be a star and can talk good, and all that, you don't need a writer. If you can't, maybe he's just not good for the business. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. No. But, in the old days, if you were good, you lasted. If you weren't, you got your 2-week notice. So it's not a babysitting service, so let the talent kind of go, but if they can't, maybe they're just not meant for it. But you get 30 writers telling them what to say, they'll never learn. And they'll be saying stuff that's silly anyway.
Now, I'm sure this is difficult, but I'm sure you also get asked a lot, so maybe you've thought about this, but do you have a most memorable moment in your career?
Well, the one we just talked about, walking out of the dugout at Shea in those days, at that age, with doing the biggest thing that was ever heard of at that time. Mm-hmm. And then I moved into a new era. And then I kind of had the same big thrill, too, at the end of the 90s with the New World Order, because I'm the one that programmed the New World Order and the way Scott Hall invaded and the way it started. And then it wound up with me versus Bischoff to save Nitro from the New World Order clutches. And I wrestled Scott Hall. And I'm the one that programmed all that and got it started right, so it was hot as hell and perfect. And that was the same feeling, too, but now instead of being hated, I was like my hero. I was like the living legend, the beloved Bruno guy, and everybody would chant. We couldn't even get a Nitro show going unless I stood up and waved to everybody, because we had it going so good. And those 2 pay-per-views were the biggest buy rates WCW ever did. Mm-hmm. So, I felt this, the same kind of great achievement level, pulling that off as I did back then, because that was like the hottest thing that wrestling had going, in the late 90s. I pulled one stunt off in the 1980s, and I pulled another one off in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm. Now, Larry, after your in-ring career was over, did you feel that you accomplished all your goals and dreams? I mean, is there anything that you wish you could have still did, or anything like that?
You know what? I really can't complain. I had a great run. I had a career longer than most, and I've been lucky because I don't have any artificial parts. I don't need surgery. I feel like a kid. But, I had the joy of doing kind of like, 2 worlds, the 20 years of wrestling in the ring, and I had no plans on becoming a broadcaster. But that was funny because they needed a broadcaster because they fired Jesse. And I was rehabbing from a little knee surgery, and they asked me to sit in. So I said, okay. So I'll sit in and do a couple shows. And then one producer ran in and said, gee, that's the best announcing we've ever heard. Mm-hmm. And then, Turner comes along. I was 40 years old at the time, and the business was starting to change. And I've been around now, for almost 20 years. So it's like anything else. You can love something, but after 20 years, let me watch a different movie.
Yeah.
But so it kind of worked out great because then they offered me a job, a hell of a job with TBS as an employee with benefits and all this. And I was making six-figure, a hell of a lot of money. And I worked a day a week doing Nitro, and a day and a half a week. I became the broadcaster and had a 10-year run. With still being in the business and getting a lot of publicity and keeping myself hot now and then. And one time I came out and did this thing with William Regal. Mm-hmm. And because he was good, and they didn't know what to do with him. And so I, came out of the broadcast booth and did something special with him, and then again with the New World Order. So that worked out to So I kind of had a lucky career and got to do a lot more than I planned. The wrestling and then the broadcasting was a great 10-year run. I enjoyed that too. Kept me famous when most guys my age were disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you still watch wrestling today?
Oh yeah. I'm still a fan, and I'm involved with some WWE stuff, and they got this NXT they film, which is right down the street from my house. So I go down to every filming when they have it and hang out with the guys and see some old buddies and talk to the young guys of a new era coming up and see if I can spread some wisdom with them. And I enjoy that. And then I'm hooked on watching them, on Raw now and new guys starting out. And yeah, but anyway, I can help them. I'd love to, But what's really cool is wrestling has kind of made a full circle. And it went through the old school era where I started. I was kind of like the last of an old school era guy that was young. And then that era ended and it changed into the national television pay-per-view era where the territories went away and it became a nationwide business. And now that era is over and it's becoming now a global network business. And the interesting part is that they're right back to stage one with the business, because all you got to do, to make it successful and everybody happy is sell one $10 ticket a month to a fan to go to Madison Square Garden and watch the big main event. So you're back to square one now, where every month you just want to sell a $10 ticket to Madison Square Garden, to the network. Plus everything else the network has to offer in the pay-per-view. So it's a hell of a deal, I think.
Now, Larry, in your opinion, is there anything wrong with the world of professional wrestling today? I mean, being, a legend of your caliber, you've been through it all. Is there something that you, watch today and you're just like, why are they doing this? Is there anything that bothers you? There's got to be something with that laugh. I don't know.
I refuse to answer on the grounds that may incriminate me.
All right.
No, you know what's happening? I'll tell you what's happening in a nutshell. It's just the beginning of a new era, like the old school. You can look back, and me and Bruno at Shea Stadium kind of marked the end of an old school era. And right after that, you had a new era, the nationwide era, where everybody was a character. It wasn't Bruno anymore. It was the Hulk or the Macho or the Superfly or the this or the Ultimate, or the that. And it would, to change into a different era. And that was hot for a while. And then it, goes up and down and slumps. And the business now has been going one way for a long time, good 12, 15 years. But now it's kind of morphing into, again, a new era. So there's some things going on now that will be changing because they have to, because they're going into a new era now. And the things of the past are going to be, like they say in the business, it was great, but it's milked. Time to shoot a new angle. So I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Now, you said you stay current with the product and everything. Are there anybody in the business today that you think are pretty cool to watch? Do you have any favorites?
Well, I tell you what, I get kind of emotionally involved because you want to talking to them, and I know they have the same dreams I have, and you hope they all make it, and a lot of them won't. It's a brutal business, but I kind of enjoy all the guys, because I know they're all trying hard and and all that, and some of them are super impressive athletes, and even some of these divas they got. Have you seen this Alicia Fox chick?
Oh yeah.
I've been watching her move. She moves better than the guys. She's incredible. They've got some incredible talent there, and into some of the new guys that started out. Bray Wyatt, kind of came along and is doing good, and Dean Ambrose is keeping a good intensity. He's doing good. Seth Rollins is doing good, and you got a bunch of like I said, a new era starting, and things will be tweaked, and the fans are going to have another explosive time. I think it's going to work out great.
Sure. Now, there's some upcoming shows where you get to actually meet, your fans. There's the big event happening down in the city coming up, and then we also have in June the New England Fan Fest, which we'll be at. What's your favorite part about these shows, and maybe getting a chance to meet some of your biggest fans out there? Is there anything that you look forward to at these?
Well, it's kind of a combination of things because, I don't do a whole lot now, which is great. I kind of golf during the week when everybody's at work. I do some things with the WWE and some shows on their network and some things, so that's working out cool. And then, once in a while, maybe once a month or so, I'll fly out. And it gives me a chance to get out of the house and feel like me again. It gives me a chance to meet the fans. Because the days, especially when I did it, the one thing you didn't want to do is meet the fans because you wanted to stay special and you wanted to stay in their imagination. And once they got to know you, you weren't special anymore. Mm-hmm. So now it's fun for me to meet them and watch their face light up because they grew up watching me. It's like meeting Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fun time, and I see some old buddies I haven't seen for a while, and and then pick up a few bucks to stash. So everybody's happy.
All right.
Now, you mentioned that you spend a lot of time in the WWF and the WWF and now the WWE. Do you think we'll ever get to see the living legend inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame?
I would hope so. I don't want to jinx anything. I think it would be a great honor. I hope so someday. I'm not all that old yet. But I hope so. It would be a cool thing. But, who knows?
Well, I'm sure we will one day, definitely for sure. Now, Larry, with the exposure with the internet today, from YouTube to even the WWE Network, people can watch wrestling 24/7. Do you ever get to rewatch some of your old moments? And I know we talked a little bit about the Bruno Sammartino feud, but is there anything else you would suggest the fans to check out, maybe for fans listening today that might not have seen you back in the day wrestle?
Yeah, you know what? There was some classic stuff we pulled off in some territories from the old days, and I know this generation, even the last generation, missed out on, like, from the AWA, like when they had it on the ESPN Classics, and we pulled off the classic with the Rolodines and Kurt Hennig and Mr. Go, and in the days when ESPN was battling USA and TBS, and with Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel and a bunch of classics, and so there was a bunch of cool stuff, like in the AWA years, and I don't know how back YouTube can get. There was some classic stuff in Georgia Championship Wrestling where me and Killard Brooks, Swerve, Paul Orndorff, and I was the first one ever to buy a belt, paid $25,000 for a national heavyweight championship. Wow. From Killard Brooks, which, and then having in Georgia. But back then, those were all the territory days. I don't know if some of that footage is even around. Mm-hmm. But it might be. It should be. Actually, all that old TBS stuff. That's cool stuff that the WWE has now, and I think in the future that they're going to have some cool shows that have all this old stuff from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the whole history, where fans will be able to go back and see how it used to be, and these wacky characters. but then the footage is around, so it's cool stuff.
All right.
Now, we're based out of the Northeast. We're coming from Poughkeepsie, New York. Do you have any favorite moments from the Northeast, maybe?
Well, you said Poughkeepsie. There was a sister couple up there years ago. The Poughkeepsie sisters. Now that you mention it, but we won't talk about that. I blame Korea. So anyway, but that whole area, that was the old stomping grounds when I started. Poughkeepsie, Albany. We'd do loops up to, Bangor and Portland and Worcester, and then down the other side to Philly and into Pennsylvania. Yeah, it was the good old days. And a different world. I mean, can you imagine this? I mean, no cell phones. Your wife couldn't track you down. There was no leash. It was, and even in my day, I mean, when people started hating me, I got shot at the one time, followed down the highway, people waving knives at me out the window. I used to carry a gun. And then you get to the airport, throw the gun in the bag, and you'd get in the airplane and throw the bag overhead. There was no security. No one cared. No one checked. Since the plane took off, you lit up a cigarette. It was a different world, brother.
Sure. Now, speaking of different world, do you think the business today maybe, I don't know, too exposed, have they pulled the curtain open too far to see what's going on, or what do you think about that? I mean, with like we're talking about the network and stuff, I mean, they have a lot of shows on TV now with like behind the scenes, and I don't know. Do you think it's just overexposed today?
Maybe to a point. Mm-hmm. I mean, I never talk too much about business, but I think it's to the point where the fans are tired of hearing about it. They just want to watch it and pretend and have a good time pretending that these bastards, which most of them are big, tough, scary bastards. And athletic, people. And if they just let the people do that instead of going out of their way to remind them, you kill fun.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned that you've been working with WWE as of late. Are there any upcoming projects maybe for the network or anything like that we'll get to see you be a part of?
Well, I'm really not positive because, I really don't know, but, I know shows with, like I said before, old footage. I don't know if they'll be hosting some shows with the old footage from things or whatever. But I'm really not sure. I mean, they got it's kind of a new thing, the network. So I'm sure they got a whole team of people trying to come up with programming. But it's just going to get more and more as time goes on. So
sure,
it'll be cool.
And now, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it yet, though. They had the Legends House, with such guys as Hacksaw Jim Duggan and.
I watched that. And,
do you think one day maybe if they do another one, we'll actually see, or would you be actually a part of it? Would you want to do something like that of spending maybe 3 months with some of these old guys?
Well, you know what the funny bit is, because I was talking to Pat and some of the guys about it, and Howard, they were telling me about it, and on one hand, it would be fun and cool, and it's one of those things that when it's done, and people can watch it for years and years and years, it's cool, and you're glad you did it. But from what I heard, it's hell. I mean, to be locked up with these same guys for such a long period of time, you want to kill each other. That's how it used to be in Japan. We used to go for 6 weeks tour. Uh-huh. And for the first couple of weeks, everybody had a great time. The next couple of weeks, everybody was getting kind of quiet and miserable. The fifth week, everybody would start getting into fights and mad at each other and hating each other. And then the last week, because we're going home, everybody was happy again,
Yeah.
So I don't know if I could go through the torture of doing it, even though it would be fun to do it when it was done.
Yeah.
Lightning round.
What is the most emotional moment you've had in the business?
Hitting Bruno with the chair.
All right. Scott Hall.
Pain in the ass.
What are some of your hobbies?
Golf.
About Vince McMahon.
Greatest promoter who will ever live.
Favorite territory to wrestle in back in the day?
Oh, the WWF. Yeah.
Chris Jericho. That's good enough, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Favorite?
He tries hard. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Favorite championship you've ever held?
Well, I guess the favorite one would have to be the biggest one. That was the AWA Heavyweight Champion of the World.
All right, and Eric Bischoff.
Good guy, hustler. He was the perfect guy to have in that position to hustle up Ted Turner at that time. When he used to listen to me. So
sure. Now,
good hustler.
Yeah. All right. We talked a lot today. We talked a lot about your career, past and present. We really appreciate you joining us today on our show. Well,
guys, I appreciate it too. Thanks for keeping the living legend alive.